Hello and welcome back to the world of the spirit consciousness. This is the continuation of the book study session on the astral body and other astral phenomena. We are now in the middle of the ninth module. In this particular section, we shall see the various factors responsible for producing dreams and the types of dreams by each actor. So we've already seen the introduction, coming straight into the factors responsible for producing dreams. So again, subdivided into four parts. The introduction, there are four key players involved. The withdrawal of the self lets the players free. So basically, in sleep, the self or the ego withdraws itself a little, and that leaves the players free to play their various games, if I may put it in those terms. And the multiple players result into confused dreams. Coming to the introduction, since this book centers around the astral body and the events closely related to it, it is not important to discuss the vast concept of dream consciousness in detail. However, to understand the functions of astral body in the dream life, the chief factors responsible for producing dream are very shortly outlined. To study the concept in detail, the student may refer to this book called Dreams by Lead Beater, from which the following details have been obtained. So there are four key players as discussed. So the factors related to the building of dreams are: one, the lower physical brain, which has a very infantile semi-consciousness and which habitually expresses every sensation in pictorial form. The etheric part of the brain, which is through which a non-stop series of unrelated pictures flow through it. The astral body, which is throbbing with a wild rush of desires and feelings. And the ego, which is in the causal body. This could be at a level of consciousness ranging from near unconsciousness to a realization of its powers. So withdrawal of the self lets the players free. So when an individual falls asleep, the self withdraws even more inside themselves. The other bodies are hence at more liberty to travel at their way. These different bodies are more likely to be influenced by impressions from outside than at any other time. They have their own consciousness, which is extremely basic. Therefore, there are several drivers which result into dreams. Further, multiple actors leads to a confused recollection in physical brain of experiences of other bodies during the sleep of the physical body. So multiple players result into confused dreams. So confused dreams may occur because of a string of unrelated images and impossible transformations in a nonsensical automatic action of the lower physical brain, a series of random thoughts flowing through the etheric brain, ceaseless waves of low desires reflected through the astral body and possibly influenced by the astral influences, a half attempt at dramatization by the undeveloped ego, and a mixture of many or all of these influences. So, having seen the factors responsible for producing dreams, let us now see the types of dreams of each of the four actors that we spoke about. So, dreams by the physical brain, dreams by the etheric brain, dreams by the astral brain, and dreams by the real self. So, these are the four actors that we spoke about, and we shall now discuss the types of dreams by each of these actors. So dreams by the physical brain. So while asleep, the ego stops controlling the brain for a period of time and the physical body yet has its own dim consciousness. There is also the collective consciousness of the physical body's individual cells. The physical consciousness has a much lesser hold on the brain as compared to the ego. As a result, only physical charges can have a large impact on a brain. For example, fluctuations in blood circulation, indigestion, heat, cold, etc. So the features of physical consciousness, the hazy physical consciousness has some curious features. It is largely instinctive. It is able to fathom an idea only when it itself is the central character. Hence, all the impulses, internal and external, are immediately interpreted as perceptual images with it being the key actor. It cannot understand abstract ideas or memories, but immediately interprets them into imaginary objects of perception. A normal direction of thought becomes a realistic transportation in space. For instance, if one thinks of Switzerland just in passing, the physical consciousness is immediately transported to an imagination of Switzerland. So it accepts pictures just as they are and is not surprised even if the picture is weird or doesn't make sense. Of the images that come in front of it, it is not able to evaluate the logical sequence, the importance, or the actual truth. It follows the principle of connected ideas and therefore images, and hence these images may be unconnected as such except that they occurred within short intervals of time or were put together in confusion. So basically, it will just string the ideas together and therefore it leads to a very confused recollection. So basically that's what we see. The activity of the physical brain can lead to confusion. So it is very sensitive to the tiniest outside influences like touch, sound, etc. These influences are greatly enlarged and inaccurate to a nearly unbelievable extent. Hence, the physical brain can create a lot of confusion and may magnify a lot of, but not all, the dream phenomena. So, the activity of the physical brain leads to a lot of confusion in recollecting dreams. Coming to the dreams by the etheric brain. So, a sleeping etheric brain is very susceptible to passing thoughts. So the etheric brain is more vulnerable to external influences while the body is asleep as compared to during normal waking consciousness. So when the mind is active and occupied, it is basically unaffected by the influence of external thoughts. However, the moment the brain is left inactive, a commotion of irrelevant thoughts start flowing into it. In maximum masses of people, the thoughts pouring into their brains are actually not their own, but bits of those given off by others. Thus, mainly in sleep life, any floating thought which finds something corresponding to itself in the sleeper's brain will be captured and possessed by the brain. So the etheric brain always remains active. Let us see this. So because of this, this initiates a complete chain of ideas and gradually disintegrate, and the chaotic, meaningless flow starts again pouring through the brain. Notably, owing to the current evolution of the world, more negative thoughts are probably hovering around than the good ones are. Thus, an uncontrolled brain is vulnerable to all types of desires which a control of the mind and brain may have prevented. So, if someone else purposely puts efforts to prevent thought currents from entering the brain of a sleeper, still the etheric brain doesn't become completely inactive. It steadily and dreamily creates images for itself from its collection of past memories. So let us see what the dreams by the astral brain are. It is only a recall in the physical brain of the astral life and its activities that occurred when the physical body was asleep. So it is a recall in the physical brain of the astral life and its activities that occurred when the physical body was asleep. This has been referred to in the video covering sleep life. A quite well advanced individual's astral body can travel comfortably to great distances from its physical body. It brings somewhat clear impressions of the locations it traveled to and the people it met. As mentioned earlier, in all situations, the astral body is majorly vulnerable to any thought or hint of desire or emotions. However, the type of desire awakened more easily depends on which level of development the individual is in and how pure is his or her astral body. So the astral body is always vulnerable to external thought currents. So in times when the mind is not controlling it actively, it constantly receives impulses from outside and eagerly responds to them. This influence is much more when asleep. Hence, a person who has given up the desire for something and has overcome it in waking consciousness may still dream of indulging in it. So even though if in ordinary waking consciousness he may feel repulsed by it. For example, a person who had a strong desire for alcohol may dream that he or she is consuming it and will feel the joy of its influence in the dream. So in daytime, when the will is practiced on the astral body, the desires are under control. However, while sleeping, when the astral body roams freely, it also breaks free to a limited extent from the ego, and it reacts to external astral influences. The previous habit then expresses itself again. These types of dreams are more common in people who are actively trying to overcome their desire nature by a control of will. So another possibility is that a person could have been a drunkard in a past life and his or her astral body yet contains some particles which are attracted there by the vibrations of permanent atoms influenced by alcoholism. Such particles are not activated in this life, but since the ego is less in control, the particles may react to vibrations of drinking from outside, and this results in the man dreaming of drinking. So one should not worry about these kinds of dreams once explained. However, they must be considered a signal that alcohol craving could possibly occur again. So finally, dreams by the real self. So real self usually cannot impress itself on the physical brain for most people. So as the astral body develops, its nature changes. And even greater is the change seen in the real self that inhabits the astral body. So when the astral body is undeveloped, it is only a cloud of mist. The ego is as asleep as the physical body doesn't know the control of its own higher plane. So if the self's idea somehow reaches it, it will not be able to mark the experience on the physical brain. So this leaves little memory of the self's experiences. This is because the self has more or less no control over its lower vehicles. A sleeping person could be at any level ranging from total unconsciousness to total astral consciousness. So as discussed earlier, many vital experiences occur in the higher planes, but the self may not be able to mark those experiences on the physical brain. So as a result, either there is no memory, physical memory of it, or only a blurred memory of it. So time and space in the self realm, the main features of consciousness and events of the self, regardless of whether the brain recalls them, are the self judgment of time and space is completely different from the one used by it in the waking consciousness, which is nearly as if time or space aren't real for him or her. There are examples of experiences in which, within a span of few seconds, as we calculated, the ego has experiences which seem to exist for several years. In this span of time, occurrences after occurrences take place in complete, precise detail. Immediate dramatization is something interesting, which is a power or habit of the self. So this is something a lot of people will relate to. So here a physical sound or touch directly reaches the self a split second before reaching the brain. This happens by bypassing the nervous system, and this split second is enough for the ego to create a sort of drama or series of scenarios which add up to the incidents which wakes up the physical body. The brain mixes up the irrational dream and the unbiased incident and thinks that it has really experienced the occurrences seen in the dream. This tendency is unique to the self, which is still rather undeveloped with regard to spirituality. So, with its development, the ego goes higher than these natural childhood pastimes. A person who has achieved continuous consciousness is very busy with the tasks of the higher plane, and such a person doesn't dedicate any energy to this dramatization. And thus, this class of dreams stops for him or her. So the powers of the prevision of the self has powers of prevision too, but to a limited extent, and at times it can see beforehand whatever events are about to occur or may occur, unless one proceeds to actively thwart it. It imprints these occurrences on the physical brain. So there are many examples of such dreams that carry a warning or prophecy. In some examples, the warning is paid attention and the required steps are taken. The predicted future can hence be changed or prevented completely. And the self thinks in symbols. So the ego seems to think in symbols when it is not inside the body during sleep. A concept which would need a lot of words to be explained are explained in one symbolic image by the ego. So if the symbolic thought is imprinted upon the brain, and if one remembers it in the awake consciousness, then it can be described in words. So in contrary to that, if it can only be interpreted as a symbol, it can create confusion. So in these types of dreams, it appears as if each individual has his or her own system of symbology. For example, water could mean a problem is going to occur, or pearls could signify tears, etc. So, with this, we have come to the end of the section dealing with the types of dreams of each of the actors. Our next video would be influencing the dream life. Stay tuned.